You are 17 years old, and you are standing behind the register at a diner called Nico's on a street in Providence, where the rent has gone up twice in your family's memory, and you are counting out change for a man who tips you 35 cents and doesn't look at you when he does it. Your hands smell like syrup and bleach. You made $58 today before the deduction your uncle takes for helping you get the job in the first place. You don't argue about the deduction. You've learned which fights are worth having and which ones just cost you sleep. Tonight, you fold the $58 into fourths and put it in your shoe, not your pocket, because your cousin's boyfriend has sticky fingers and everyone in the house knows it, and nobody says it out loud. Your parents arrived from Cape Verde with $600 and a folder of documents that took 4 years to become real. Your father tells this story exactly once at a cookout to a man he's trying to impress, and you overhear it from the kitchen window, and something in you locks into place that you won't understand for another decade. The $600 wasn't a beginning. It was a ceiling with a number attached to it. You learn the currency of your house early, not dollars. Certainty. Whether the light bill is a this month problem or a next month problem. Whether your mother's voice on the phone is the flat, efficient voice or the careful one, the one she uses when she's deciding how much of the truth a person on the other end deserves. You learn to read a kitchen the way other kids learn to read a room for adult moods. You are 12 years old, and you already know that the refrigerator hums differently when it's mostly empty. You know the sound of a landlord's knock versus a neighbor's. You know these things the way other kids know batting averages, without ever deciding to learn them. Currently, nearly a third of immigrant households in the U.S. report living paycheck to paycheck within their first decade in the country. Your family wasn't an exception to a rule. Your family was the rule, quietly, the way most rules operate without anyone naming them out loud at the dinner table. At Nico's, you start as a busser. You get promoted to register because you're fast with mental math, faster than the actual register some days, and the owner, a heavy-set man named Pete, who has run the place for 22 years, notices. Pete doesn't say much. Pete watches. One slow Tuesday afternoon, you're refilling ketchup bottles, and you ask him, not because you plan to, it just comes out, how much the diner actually makes. He looks at you for a second, like he's deciding something. Then he tells you. Food costs run around 31%. Labor's another 28%. Rent's fixed, $4,200 a month, hasn't moved in 6 years because he owns the building outright. After everything, he clears somewhere around $9,000 a month on a good month, less in January, more in the summer when the tourists come through for the beach traffic. You do the math before he finishes the sentence. $9,000 a month is more than your father makes at the warehouse in 5 weeks. And Pete isn't working harder than your father. He's working differently. The observation doesn't feel like inspiration. It feels like a wound opening somewhere you didn't know you had tissue. You start noticing the room the way Pete notices it. Which tables tip? Which regulars order the same thing every time and could be upsold on a side they'd actually enjoy? Which supplier delivery shows up short 2 days a week without anyone catching it? You keep this to yourself because there's no version of a 17-year-old telling a business owner how to run his margins that doesn't sound insane. But you write it down anyway, in a spiral notebook you keep under the mattress, next to the shoe with the folded bills in it. Pages and pages of numbers that belong to somebody else's business, because you don't have one of your own yet to write about. By 18, you have $2,100 saved, money nobody in your house knows about, and you spend $1,800 of it on a laptop and a domain name and a course you found at 2 a.m. that promises to teach you how to build websites for small businesses. The course is mostly filler, recycled slides, and testimonials from people who may or may not exist. But buried in the filler is one real idea. Every small business owner like Pete has no website, or a website built in 2009 that loads sideways on a phone, and none of them know what that cost them in a customer who gave up scrolling and called someone else instead. You build your first site for free, for Pete, as practice. It takes you 6 weeks of nights, teaching yourself the parts the course skipped by watching free tutorials at 1 a.m. with the volume down so your mother doesn't hear the laptop fan through the wall. It's ugly by the standards you'll have in 2 years, but it works, and Pete's online orders go from nearly nothing to $600 a week within 2 months. Pete doesn't pay you. Pete tells his friend who owns the hardware store 2 blocks down. The hardware store owner pays you $400. You remember the exact moment the check clears because it's the first money you've ever made that didn't come from someone standing over you while you made it. You charge $400, then $650, then $900, always underpricing because you don't yet believe your own math. Currently, the average freelance web developer in the US charges somewhere between $1,000 and $5,000 per small business site. You don't know this number yet. You'll learn it the hard way, the way you learn most things, by finding out later how much you left on the table for people who would have paid it without blinking. You save $3,400 over the next year doing sites on weekends while still working the register at Nico's because you don't trust the freelance money yet. Not really. Not the way you trust an hourly wage you can count in your shoe. Then you make your first real mistake. You spend $2,600 of it on ads and a business coach who runs a course promising to 10 times your client list in 90 days. The ads produce 2 leads. Neither converts. The coach stops responding to emails after week 3, and when you finally get him on a call, he tells you the problem is your energy, not his product. You believe him for about 4 days. Then you stop believing him. You check your account on a Sunday morning in November. $743. That's what's left of over a year of dish station money and diner shifts and 2 a.m. laptop nights. You sit on the edge of your bed and you don't cry, but something in your chest does the thing that's worse than crying, the quiet, flat thing that just sits there. You go to work anyway. You scrape a plate into the gray bin, and you watch Pete move through the dining room with that same unbothered ease, and you think, not with anger, just with clarity. He didn't get here by finding a shortcut. He got here by staying, day after unremarkable day, for 22 years, while people like the coach sold shortcuts to people like you. So you stay too. Not at Nico's forever, but in the work itself. Slowly, without a soundtrack, the grind years arrive and don't announce themselves as grind years. They just feel like Tuesdays. You build a site for a laundromat in exchange for free laundry for 6 months. You build one for a barbershop in Pawtucket for $900, and the owner refers you to his cousin, who owns 3 more barbershops across 2 towns. By 21, you're not building sites one at a time anymore. You're running a small studio out of your bedroom, coordinating 2 freelancers you found on a forum, taking a cut of every project, charging clients a monthly retainer of $350 to $700 to maintain what you built instead of walking away after the invoice like everyone else in the space does. At 22, you're clearing $4,100 a month from 11 retainer clients. You still live at home. You still hand your mother $300 every month without being asked, because that's not a decision. That's just what the money is for. Some of it, always, before it's for anything else. The rest goes into an account you don't touch, growing the way things grow when nobody's watching them closely enough to interrupt them. At 24, one of your retainer clients, a regional laundry supply distributor, asks if you can build them something bigger than a website, an internal tool to track inventory across 40 locations. You've never built software like this. You say yes anyway. and spend 4 months teaching yourself what you need to know at night, the same 2 a.m. rhythm from 6 years earlier. Except now the stakes have zeros on them, and a real contract with a real signature attached. You deliver it 6 weeks late, apologizing the entire time, but you deliver it, and it works, and the distributor pays you $22,000 for something that took you 4 months and cost you almost nothing but sleep and the last of your patience. That's the year the shape of the thing changes. You stop thinking about clients and start thinking about a product. You take what you built for the distributor and rebuild it from scratch, cleaner, generalized, so it could serve any small distributor managing inventory across scattered locations. You charge $180 a month per business. It's slow going at first. 11 businesses in the first 6 months, mostly people Pete or the barbershop owner vouched for. Then 18. Then 40. Once word starts moving through an industry that talks to itself more than outsiders realize. By 26, you have 61 businesses paying that monthly fee. Recurring revenue that doesn't require you to bill an hour of anything. $10,980 a month, arriving whether you touch the software that day or not, whether you're sick, whether you're at your cousin's wedding, whether you're doing anything at all. Currently, roughly 20% of small businesses fail within their first year, most of them for reasons that have nothing to do with the product and everything to do with cash flow they didn't see coming. You know this because you almost became a statistic in that 20% twice. Once with the ad money, once at 25 when a client didn't pay for 90 days and you had to explain to your landlord why rent was late for the first time in your adult life. You never let it happen a third time. You start keeping 6 months of expenses in an account you don't look at unless it's an emergency. The same instinct your mother had with the coffee tin, except yours earns 4.6% instead of nothing. At 27, a private equity scout finds your product through a cold email that almost goes to spam. They want to talk. You take the meeting more out of curiosity than intent. 2 men in a conference room in Boston, both younger than you expected, offer you $1.9 million for the whole thing outright, structured as a clean asset sale. You sit there and you think about Pete's dining room and the $9,000 a month and the folded bills in your shoe, and something in you, quiet but absolute, says no. You don't fully understand the no in the moment. You understand it later, on the train home, staring at your reflection in the window going through a tunnel. You didn't say no because you thought the number was too small. You said no because the room you were sitting in wasn't your room yet, and you weren't finished building it. You go home. You don't tell your mother about the meeting. There's no sentence for it yet that would land the way she'd need it to land. She asks how work is going, and you say fine, and it isn't a lie. It's just not the whole shape of the truth. 18 months later, the software crosses $410,000 in annual recurring revenue. You hire your first full-time employee, a developer named Marcus, who used to work at a bank and quit because he wanted to build things that mattered to him instead of things that mattered to a shareholder report he never met. By 30, you have 6 employees, a small office above a dry cleaner in Providence, and revenue crossing $1.4 million a year. You are still driving the same Honda Civic you bought used at 22. The crack in the windshield from a rock on I-95 has been there for 3 years. You keep meaning to fix it. You never do. Not because you can't afford it, but because fixing it feels like admitting the car is something other than what it's always been to you. At 33, the software crosses $4.8 million. You expand into 2 adjacent verticals, restaurant supply and commercial cleaning. Industries you understand instinctively because you grew up inside the margins of businesses just like them, counting food costs before you could legally sign a lease. You are not innovating in the way people mean, when they say that word on a stage somewhere with a headset mic. You are just solving the same unglamorous problem. A small business owner who doesn't know where their inventory actually is. For more and more owners who look like Pete, who talk like Pete, who trust you faster because something in how you explain a margin sounds like it was learned, not studied. At 35, an accountant you hired 2 years earlier, a woman named Renata, who has seen every kind of mess a growing company can make, hands you a summary during a quarterly review. She says almost nothing while you read it. Then she says, "You built something most people spend their whole careers trying to describe in a pitch deck, and you never once described it. Total valuation, factoring recurring revenue multiple standard for the category, just over $9.1 million. You sit with the number the way you've sat with every number that's mattered in your life, quietly, at a desk, alone. There's no champagne. There's a spreadsheet open in one tab and a text from your mother in another asking if you're coming to Sunday dinner. You go to Sunday dinner. Your father asks about work the way he always does, generically, politely, the way you ask someone about weather. You tell him it's going well. He nods. He doesn't ask for the number, and you don't offer it, because the number isn't the part of this he'd know how to hold. What he'd hold, what he does hold every single Sunday without knowing it, is that you're still at the table, that you drive the same car, that you handed your mother an envelope in March without being asked, the way you've done every March for 11 years, because some things about you never updated even after everything else did. Your cousin, the one whose boyfriend used to have sticky fingers, calls you in October. She needs $3,000 for a security deposit on an apartment to finally get her and her son out of a place with a landlord who won't fix the heat. You could send it in the time it takes to read the text. You almost do. Instead, you call her back and ask her to send you her budget, actual numbers, actual bills, the way Pete once handed you his margins without knowing he was handing you a whole future. You spend 2 Saturdays with her at her kitchen table, the way nobody ever sat with you at yours. You find $180 a month bleeding out in subscriptions she forgot she had. You help her open an account that actually earns something instead of sitting flat. You send the $3,000 anyway, because some gaps you close with money, and some you close with time, and this one needed both. She doesn't know what the $3,000 costs you now, in a life where $3,000 barely registers on a screen. You don't tell her. That's not modesty. That's just understanding what the story needs to be. You are 38 years old, sitting in your car outside Nikos, which is still there, though Pete sold it 2 years ago to a young couple who kept the name out of respect. You haven't been back in months. You go inside and order the same thing you used to make for other people for 11 years, and the new owner doesn't know who you are. And that's fine. That's the whole architecture of the thing, working exactly as it was built to work. Nobody in this room knows what's sitting in your accounts. Nobody needs to. You leave a tip that would have meant something enormous to the 17-year-old who used to stand where the register still is, and the server just says, "Thanks," and moves to the next table. And that's exactly right, too. You think about the spiral notebook under the mattress. You still have it, somewhere, in a box, in a closet, in a house you own outright now in a neighborhood 20 minutes from the one you grew up in, close enough that your mother didn't have to leave the only city she's ever trusted. You think about the folded $58 in your shoe. You think about the man who tipped you 35 cents and never looked at you. And you think, without bitterness, that you hope wherever he is, someone finally looked at him too. Your daughter is 7. She's at the table when you get home, working on a math worksheet, frustrated in the specific way of someone certain they're missing something obvious. You sit down across from her. She shows you the problem. You look at it, and for a second, just a second, You're back at Pete's register, counting change for a man who never once said your name. And you understand, fully and quietly, everything that number in Renata's spreadsheet was actually for.